And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the puerile and insipid forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back from the weekend. And I realize that my weekends are generally one day longer than yours, but welcome back in any case. The first full week after the holidays, and it is shaping up to be no less busy than it always is. I fully expect that this week we ought to hear at least a couple of campaign announcements from one person or another. I'm sure there's at least one other, perhaps two other people that are going to run for governor, and then we've got all the other races. And I've heard, various rumors of this race or that race, but as far as anything concrete, no, I really haven't heard that. However, there's some conjecture that we could be making, and then of course we have to talk about Trump and Venezuela. Now, I mean that happened last week, but we really haven't had a chance to talk about it at length on the program, and the thing just gets bigger and bigger. I had a call yesterday from my pal Rod Miller, and he just wanted to get my take on Venezuela. And, I just told him, as far as it goes for arresting a criminal, I mean, there's no doubt about it. Nicolas Maduro is a very, very bad guy. He's in with terrorists. He's the one that's been facilitating a lot of it. So, I mean, he definitely had to go. I've got no problems with our courts indicting him. I have no problem with arresting him. We've done that, lots. And Obama and Biden both, they didn't arrest people. They sent drones after him and killed him. So at the very least, we're arresting him this time around. I've got no problem with any of that. Now, the thing that I do have questions about, however, is what does it mean we're going to run the country? Because that's what the president said in his first press conference. We're going to run the country for a while. Okay, fine. What does that mean? What exactly does that entail? How long are we running the country? Are we going to have, how many of our personnel are going to be on the ground? There's lots of questions surrounding that. And by the way, who's next? I mean, if we're going to do this in Venezuela, which I totally get, where is it going to stop? Are we going to Mexico next? Are we going to Colombia? Certainly, those are terrible leaders. Certainly, those people are in with narcotics trafficking cartels. So, there's no question that those are bad guys too. But my question is, where does it end? Or does it end? Do we fully take on the role of the world's policeman, which I generally reject as just not on principle, but just kind of on face. I mean, that's not our job. Now, it is our job to protect our citizens and to protect our national security. And to the extent that those organizations threaten our national security, yes, we have to protect Americans. The only question is, how far do we go? So I've got plenty of stuff to talk about there. But I should tell you that this morning's program, again, I'm going to have to cut it a little bit short. I have a funeral to attend later on this morning, and so I've got to have enough time to get where I'm going. So we'll do about an hour and a half, and then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll do a full program. But we begin this morning with the turkey vulture. In an article entitled Joint Appropriations Committee Weighs $43 million Ask from Community Colleges. Now, I mean, the community colleges always ask for money. They are apparently incapable of raising their own cash. So they're going to come to the Appropriations Committee. But the reason that I chose this article is not because of the subject matter. It's not because it's the budget session. There's one line in it from Ogden Driscoll, old Augie. Let's see if I can find it real here. Here we go. Here's what he said. We're trying to cut a budget in a time of surplus. We can take that money and we can put it somewhere that has nothing to do with the future of Wyoming, or we can invest it in our youth and our future. Quote, I would point out that it's the lowest baseline budget in 15 years. I encourage us all to wear black. Think black. Now, what he's referring to, and that's not the quotation that I was driving at. I'll get to that one in just a second. But this whole wear black, think black thing, I think is a stupid idea, though it did work. So the members of the conservative members of the Joint Appropriations Committee all bought red sports coats. And they said that they were going to wear their red sports coats until Wyoming was back in the black. And, you hear an AC/DC song, playing in the backgrounds at a future point. Well, the rest of them decided that they're all going to wear black. And now it has been a visual display of where the members of the Joint Appropriations Committee are. Either you're wearing red, meaning that we're in the red and we shouldn't be spending all this ridiculous money, or B, you believe that Wyoming is in the black. Now, what Driscoll said is it is possible to cut ourselves into a crisis. And let's see here. I feel the responsibility that if you do that, you do in a balancing budget. We presidents see, let's see here. No. Well, it's got to be in here. But anyway, it was Driscoll that said it. I hate it when, I should underline these things. But essentially what he said was we could cut our way into a crisis. Now, I don't really see how any of that is possible. There's no way possible, I think. Oh, here it is. It's right at the top. Maybe I should look at the beginning of the article. Ha! Okay, so anyway, it starts out, quote, we literally have the ability to cut our way into a budget crisis. Senator Ogden Driscoll warned at the December Wyoming State Legislators Joint Appropriations Committee. The conversation about funding for Wyoming's community colleges was part of a broader discussion. Okay, so how exactly can you cut your way into a budget crisis? Now, we know that the Democrats' line a lot of the times is, well, you can't cut your way to prosperity. Well, I don't know that that's necessarily true. When you reduce the size of government, when you reduce the amount of regulations, when you reduce taxes, when you reduce the role that the government plays in your business and personal life, invariably prosperity follows. That you will succeed, now, according to your own merits, you get what you put in, and your outcomes are generally pretty similar to the amount of work that you put in. But if you reduce government and you reduce spending and you reduce taxes and you get government the heck out of the way, businesses will prosper. It's been proven time and time again. Supply side economics works, my friends. And the only time that it stops working is when government gets in the way. So when Driscoll says, well, if we cut too much, we're going to have a crisis. Now, what crisis could you be referring to, Senator Driscoll? That maybe the Department of Health is way bigger than it needs to be. In Wyoming, the Department of Health is the single largest expenditure. Now, I mean, there's various different programs that are funded, but taken as a whole, the Department of Health is the largest expenditure in the state of Wyoming. And there are all sorts of things that the Department of Health is involved in. Very recently, I believe it was the Cowboy, put out an article about this ridiculous thing called bear care. Now, first, I would argue that this is the Department of Health engaging in politics, that they intentionally chose the name Bear Care. It's not because that it's catastrophic coverage, that it's not because there's lots of bear attacks, because we know there are some every year, but really it's a pretty small number. I mean, we're talking no more than 30. Probably no more than 20. So the Department of Health chose that name because the chairman of the Appropriations Committee is Representative John Bear. And so it was their attempt to put his name on a crappy piece of legislation, which, by the way, a piece of legislation that the name is not getting out of the House of Representatives. And I doubt very seriously that this Bear Care is going to get out of there either, regardless of if the federal government is funding it or not. And let me tell you why. The argument, go back a couple of sessions. The main argument from all of the redcoats and the liberals surrounding Medicaid expansion is that we have to pay for it, because if we don't, everybody just goes to the emergency room and they get taken care of that way. And then the hospital is left to foot the bill. That was the main reason why everybody said, well, not everybody, but all the liberals said, we have to pass Medicaid expansion. Well, isn't it interesting that this Bear Care, that's exactly what it covers, that it is to cover those emergency room expenditures. You see, a lot of these people in government, none of them really think that we remember anything. None of us will go back and look at any of the articles that were published before. And to a large extent, they're pretty justified in thinking that most people are not informed. Most people have a pretty short attention span when it comes to politics. And so, not me, of course, your illustrious host has a mind like a steel trap full of mice. But I can tell you, my friends, that the argument for Medicaid expansion, which would have been a disastrous bill to put forward, and I fully expect that Nancy Case will try it again. That's been his baby for a really long time. But their whole argument was, everybody goes to emergency rooms. And so we have to have a way to cover that, and the state has to pay for it. And now, again, isn't it interesting that the justification for this Bear Care, emergency care, I think they ought to call it Gordon Care, because he's one of the ones that signed on to it. But it's interesting that the justification is all of these emergency rooms. Now, it is the federal government that is providing funds. But keep in mind, that's your money too. That you pay. The government doesn't have its own money, even though it spends like a drunken sailor. It's pretty easy to spend other people's money, my friends. But all of that is tax dollars. And so don't think for a second that you're not paying for this, because you are, and you will. And if it goes through, you will continue to pay for it. It's a ridiculous idea. Government needs to get the heck out of the way. And, I feel for the people that don't have health insurance. I really do. But government ought not be the solution to that. It is impossible for government to provide charity simply because, as Davy Crockett said, it's not theirs to give. That's the money that belongs to American citizens, and we shouldn't be spending money on anything outside of the necessary functions of government. Only those things that are enumerated to government by the Constitution, both the U.S. and the state Constitution. That's the only thing that we should be messing around with. But our politicians continue to add all sorts of different things to the government dole. And in this case, it's going to end up being this stupid Bear Care. And again, it's just another, it literally is more of the camel's nose underneath the tent. That you allow government into, more and more sectors of what ought to be the private sector, and you will get more and more government. And, and Driscoll is the one who's always saying, well, we can't cut this. Why not? It's not government's job. It's the job of the private sector. The reason why healthcare costs are through the roof is because government is involved. And, I had this very same conversation with a friend of mine, a week ago. He lives in South Dakota. And he says, well, it's the insurance companies are completely out of hand. Well, yeah, they are. You know why? Because of government. You get government out of the way and the free market will take over. Now, here's an interesting point that I think that we ought to talk about. Are people going to get hurt by the expiration of these Obamacare subsidies? Well, yeah, it is going to hurt, but that's the only way out of it. So it's not going to be very fun in the short term. But when we're talking about government spending, it's a lot like talking about an alcoholic. That you're really not going to change your ways until you hit rock bottom. And I can tell you for a fact from my own personal experience that hitting rock bottom, it hurts. And it's meant to, because if it doesn't hurt, it's not going to convince you to do something different. And so with the expiration of those Obamacare subsidies, premiums are going to go up. But what is also going to happen is a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford to pay them. And so what happens when, let's say you own a store. My parents owned a sporting goods store when I was growing up. So I'm very familiar with this. But let's say that you own your own store and you're just not getting customers in there because, you've decided you're going to make a little bit of cash off of them and you have to make your own living. And so you've artificially raised the prices of everything. Well, your customers ended up going to your competitor down the road. Now, the only way to get your constituents back or your customers back is to lower prices and put them back in the ballpark where everybody else is. That's what needs to happen with insurance. Get government out of the way. Remove the guy with the never-ending checkbook. And that's the reason why premiums are so high. It's the reason that college is tuition is so expensive. It's because if the guy that's paying your bills has an unlimited checkbook, why wouldn't you raise all of your prices? That's how you get $500, aspirin pills and a pair of scissors that cost you $385. I wouldn't tell you why I know that one. But the point here is that the only way to solve it, the only way to get out of it, is to get government out of the way. And that is what the expiration of the Obamacare subsidies did. Are premiums going to go up? Yep, you're darn right they're going to, because you have a bunch of insurance companies that have been living off the government teat for so long that they think that they are entitled to those funds. And why shouldn't they? For the longest time, government has allowed insurance companies to charge whatever they want. Well, now, since the Obamacare subsidies are gone, they're going to have to fend on their own. And eventually, the market will stabilize. And that's what needs to happen. The drunk's got to go dry, my friends, and that's what needs to happen with all of these subsidies and healthcare costs and the rest of it. Our government has just become too large and overburdensome. And one of the I love this one. So during the interim, right in between our legislative sessions, the main argument from all of the liberals and the redcoats was that, well, we can't have more tax cuts because if we do that, we're going to have to cut city services. Well, first, you should only be paying for those services that are mandated by the Constitution. That's the first thing. The Constitution doesn't say anything about taxi services. It doesn't say anything about funding nonprofits. It doesn't say anything about building flower gardens, Lonnie Wright. By the way, there's right now, well, I guess in about 40 minutes, there's supposed to be a pretty interesting thing happening at the Sheridan County Commissioners. Christy Antoinette Haswell, riding around in my automobile, is going to try to become the chairman. I can't wait to hear how that turns out. And actually, either way, it turns out good for us, because if she is elected chairman, then it's going to be nonstop. It's going to be her theme song, riding around in my automobile. And why did she get that? Well, because she got arrested for a DUI, and where she drove all over the sidewalk and she hit somebody's mailbox, and I just couldn't resist the urge one day to give her a theme song, and so she's got it. But anyway, I'm way off topic now. All of the arguments, they're not really arguments, complaints from cities and towns and municipalities is, well, if you cut the budget, then we're not going to be able to have all these city services. Good. You shouldn't be paying for them in the first place. You shouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars on things that you could do without, like kitty cat shelters. Yeah. A whole bunch of nonprofits. And here's the way that they get around it. They claim that it's a contract for services. Well, again, It doesn't matter if government, your city government, your county government is the one that's attempting to provide the service, or if you're paying somebody else to provide the service. That's just a loophole to get around. You think you're getting around what the Constitution says, because you're not directly paying for said service. I mean, it's so cities and towns are so much out of the box that they too need to feel the pinch of budget cuts. And the only way they're going to, and here's another one. Man, I got talking about taxes, and look out. It is absolutely wrong to tax your citizens more than is absolutely required. Wyoming has, and the cities and towns are no different. It's just, economies of scale. But Wyoming has $30 billion in the savings account. $30 billion. And every legislative session, well, since I've been watching them, so 5 years, 5 sessions, I've heard, well, we've got this excess cash. We should put this away in our rainy day fund. And we're not talking like, a couple $100,000 here, $1 million left over there. No. Hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's added up to be about $30 billion with a B. Now, if you end up with $100 or $200 million left over from everything that you wanted to spend, and to understand the full scope of this, my friends, you need to go to Cheyenne and watch these people when it's budget session time. You'll see so many crazy amendments that you're just not going to believe it. But they do spend like drunken sailors, like as Chuck Gray famously said once, well, it's just like you're throwing money out of a helicopter, or, whatever analogy you want to use, hogs feeding at the trough, whatever it is. But it is truly an impressive sight to behold. And, the only way that we're going to stop any of this is if there's some pain, that if there's an abrupt stop and you just don't have enough money to pay for it. And that's the only way that things are going to happen. All right, to the cow pie. An article entitled, let's see here. We got enough. Well, you know what? It's early, but this is going to take me longer than about 6 minutes. So let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about YDOT. Yeah, their $400 million deficit that they seem to have had, since, 10 years ago. It's absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, we'll talk about that when we come back. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism, coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on a Tuesday. I'm your host, David Iverson, Wyoming's conservative voice, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record, quite frankly, that the mainstream media is completely incapable of attaining. I wish they'd try. And you know what? For them, if there was an attempt for the media to actually be straight with you, to give you actual real news, I'd start the counter over for them. I'd say, you know what? We can start from day one. We'll forget, we won't forget, but as far as your counter goes, we'll reset it and you can start from zero. But they won't even do that because most of what you get is opinion that is wrapped up to look like news in crappy wrapping paper that is so transparent that you can already see what's inside. But they keep doing it, which is why we started the Open Range Record. And it is Wyoming's newest full-blown news platform. The website is live right now, openrangerecord.com. Very soon, we'll have the Android and iOS app ready to go. And, I don't know, the guy that built it, the guy that programmed all of it, I think he's a genius because he made the mobile app look just like the website. And so anyway, I'm super, super proud of it, my friends. Me and my partner, Rebecca Bextel, put the whole thing together. And it's going to be fantastic. So go check it out. It's openrangerecord.com. It is live right now. And this afternoon, I'm going to be posting some more articles to it, but there's a whole bunch of them on there right now that you can check out. And if you're interested in writing news, if there's something going on in your community or you're going to go to Cheyenne or whatever, and you just write a quick news article about what you see, send it to me. I mean, it doesn't take you very long. Hey, this is what they're voting on. This is what this dude said. This is what this guy said. This is what this gal said. Here's what the bill's about, and send it to me. I would really appreciate it, and I'll publish it for you. So anyway, it's the whole goal is news on the news page and opinion on the opinion page, the way things are supposed to be. And while it's true, you can never be completely unbiased. You should at very least make an effort, and that's what we're doing. So we're really proud of it. Go check it out, openrangerecord.com. To the cow pie, in an article entitled, with governor's backing, WYDOT asks legislature for $282.8 million budget. What happened to their $400 million budget shortfall that we hear about every year? What happened to that? I mean, did it go away? Did you somehow figure that you didn't need it? Or are you just saving it for later? Because according to this article, the only amount of money you need is $282.5 million. I mean, you get these illions confused if you're not too careful. But here's what the cow pie says. Quote, after Governor Mark Gordon announced his approval of the Wyoming Department of Transportation's full $282.8 million request for the next 2-year budget cycle, state lawmakers on Monday questioned the agency's staffing shortfalls, snowplow collisions, and the cost to outfit state troopers with tasers. The meeting of the JAC at the state capitol in Cheyenne marks the start of week 3 in the committee's 4-week budget planning marathon. The full legislature will also help craft the state's budget when the session gets started on February 9th. I can't wait. The session is like the Super Bowl for me. I know. It's I know you don't want to do it, but I enjoy it, and I love bringing you everything that's happening down there. And you know what I love most about it is all of the little stories that are on the sidelines that these jokers at the cow pie are never going to tell you about, or that they know about, but they're just never going to write about it. I love it. And I saw one, I think it was Representative Rachel Rodriguez-Williams posted it on X, and I had totally forgotten about this. But the bill was it was an abortion bill or anti-abortion bill. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't either. It was the bill to ban mask and vaccine mandates. Pretty common sense for anybody claiming to be a conservative. Well, I noticed that Cyrus Western was not on the floor. And so I got to looking at him, and I found him crouching beneath one of the pillars at the back of the House floor. And I mean, he literally was trying to hide. And unfortunately, I couldn't get my camera out fast enough to take a picture of him crouching, but I did get a picture of him standing behind the pillar, kind of out of sight of the Speaker of the House. So he was off the floor, and he wouldn't have to be on record for voting against the ban on mask mandates. So it's those types of stories that really get me going, that I get to show you how the inner workings of the legislature, all the little side things that happen, interviews, and I mean, there's a ton that goes on that the cow pie, the turkey vulture, the mainstream media, they're never going to tell you about. So I'm super stoked about it. Got about a month to go, a month and a couple of days anyway. But on the docket is YDOT. Now, as I mentioned, remember, the media told us over and over and over that YDOT has a $400 million staffing funding shortfall. There's that they just can't do their job because they're missing $400 million. Now, interestingly enough, here's where that number came from. When former director of YDOT, Luke Reiner, took office when he was appointed, the YDOT claimed that their budget shortfall was $40 million. 40, not 400. $40 million. In 6 weeks, that number magically turned into $400 million. And then years later, in fact, as early as this summer, this summer, YDOT, and Luke Reiner's not even at the helm anymore, but they're still claiming that they have a budget shortfall of $400 million. Now, you and I know that prices go up, wages go up. It costs more to do business than it did a couple of years ago. So if all of that is true, and it is, why is it that their budget shortfall number didn't go up anymore? Secondly, how did 40 million turn into 400 million? Well, it's because it's all fictitious anyway, and this article proves it. Let's see here, and I quote, after Governor Gordon announced his approval of the YDOT Transportation's full $282.8 million request for the next 2-year budget cycle, state lawmakers on Monday questioned the agency's staffing shortfalls, snowplow collisions, and the cost. So the full legislature, I already read that to you. YDOT frequently voices funding woes, and here it is, and anticipated shortfalls of at least $400 million, along with its mandate to maintain thousands of miles of state highways. The legislature tried to remedy that in the 2025 session by moving vehicle sales tax into the agency's coffers in the future. YDOT will start collecting that money in 2027, according to Director Darren Westby. In the meantime, the agency is asking for $256 million for the 2027-2028 biennium. Rolling costs plus $26.74 million in exception requests. Exceptions are the things that they want to add to the budget. So the way that you craft a budget is you determine what you spent last year. And then the next column is, what would it take you to do the same thing that you did last year? So that's the next column. And usually, almost always, that number goes up. And then the next column is, what do you want to add on top of it? So what's the gravy on top of the potatoes? Gordon backed the entire request, albeit with some tweaks regarding funding sources. The agency's budget for the most recent biennium was more than $30 million less than the current request, at about $250.2. YDOT is unique among state agencies in the nation as one of the just two. With Wisconsin, that includes its state highway law enforcement agency under its umbrella. The structure has advantages, all right, blah, blah, blah. Let's see here. Of the overall budget, the Wyoming Highway Patrol's request is $91.23 million for the next year. The agency's documentation of its pitch notes $5.75 million from that is federal money. And let's see here. One of those big ones is they want to, here we go, tasers. Yeah. So the Wyoming Highway Patrol wants a rolling fund so that they can use so they can still buy more tasers. Here's what the Cowboy says. The Wyoming Highway Patrol is asking for $300,000 per annum and on an ongoing basis for tasers and associated programs and technology. House Appropriations Chair John Bear of Gillette asked them whether he'd be comfortable with making that a one-time request rather than a rolling payout. Cameron said that he would. Scott Smith of Lingle asked why the agency is making such a significant shift toward tasers. Quote, the Wyoming Highway Patrol culturally has a great respect for the sanctity of life, answered Cameron. Without a taser would resort to either hands or an impact weapon like a baton. Troopers shy away from using their batons unless it's necessary because of the optics of that. But the certification and virtual reality program associated with the tasers is slated to cost $86. Yeah, that's what that said, $86 a month. Cameron said the virtual reality system puts the trooper in training stress environment. So they want $300,000 every year for tasers. Sounds like they're only going to get it one time. Here's you're going to love these numbers. The top of my head about came off when I heard these. So here you go. $323,480 to replace computers. All right, I get that. You got to replace computers pretty regularly. The one I have here in the studio is several years old, and it still works just fine. But if I were doing things right, which I almost always do, I'd replace it, every other year or so. So I'm due for one there. So I get the computers. $2.087 million for building occupancy costs, whatever that is. $631,000 for a vehicle usage, $589,000 for body camera, in-car camera, and digital evidence platforms, $90,000 for in-car modems and antennae, $710,000 for core operational and mandated recurring. Wow. Okay, so let me read this one again to you. $710,864 for core operational and mandated recurring software licensing and maintenance costs. So what that is, that's just subscriptions. That's all that is. And it's only the Wyoming Department of Transportation. So imagine how much money we're paying in subscriptions. Now, big software packages, one of them that I know quite a lot about is the GIS program. It's called ArcGIS. The maintenance costs on it are pretty expensive. For a single user license, that was, I think it was like $400 or $500 a year. So I get it, but just imagine how much money we're paying for software licensing and programs that we don't actually own. $856,000 to increase field supervision effectiveness. So that's close to $1 million for supervisors to attend classes. That's what that one is. And let's see here. $575,000 for leadership training costs. So there's a whole bunch of fat to be trimmed out of that budget. And we absolutely, and see, here's the problem. This is really the first budget session that all of these agencies have had to go through when conservatives are at the helm. For the longest time, they would submit their budget request, and to one degree or another, it was pretty much approved. And there was very little that we didn't spend money on. Well, now you have a whole bunch of conservatives that are in charge, and they're finally asking questions about, hey, why are we spending this much money on tasers? Why is it that your budget number was $400 million short a month ago, and now you're only asking for $282? Couldn't it be that maybe that you didn't have that budget shortfall to begin with? I'm just saying, just guessing that maybe that's what the deal is there. Now, here's an interesting one, completely different subject. But I saw this morning and I thought, you know what? I got to go to a church here a little bit later, and here in a couple hours anyway. And so why not talk about this one? From the post-millennial, Scott Adams announces that he will convert to Christianity in his final days. Legendary author Scott Adams announced that he plans to convert to Christianity in his final days, saying the decision came after reflection as he faces his terminal illness. Scott Adams is riddled with cancer. And it's the prognosis to all of it is not good. Now, what he says is, quote, "I've not been a believer, but I also have respect for any Christian who goes out of their way to try to convert me." Now, let me just show you a video of what he said, and then we'll talk about it. And this is worthy of talking about, my friends, because there's a lot of people that that think along the same lines as he does. So let's watch the video, and when we come back, I'll explain why that's not really a smart decision. But here you go. Here is Scott Adams.
Whenever I talk about the simulation, and especially when I talk about my own impending death, many of my Christian friends and Christian followers say to me, "Scott, you still have time. You should convert to Christianity." And I usually just let that sit because that's not an argument I want to have. I've not been a believer, and but I also have respect for any Christian who goes out of their way to try to convert me. Because how would I believe you believe your own religion if you're not trying to convert me? So I have great respect for people who care enough that they want me to convert and then go out of their way to try to convince me. So you're going to hear for the first time today that it is my plan to convert.
But I'm not going to do it right now. I'm planning on converting. As far as I know, Scott, there's no HR department up there. There's no real process you have to go through. It's not like there's an application process. I mean, there is, but it's pretty simple. All you got to do is accept Jesus and you're good to go. But you got to do it, legitimately. And you have to be, heartfelt about it. It can't be just something that you're thinking about and that, well, maybe it makes sense and I plan on converting. There's no reason why you wouldn't do it right now, right? If you truly believed, and you wanted to have Jesus into your life, you just say so. It's called prayer. That's all you have to do. This isn't something that you have to set out a process for. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it is a big deal. It's not hard. You just ask Jesus and boom. But you got to believe it and you got to want to do it. And it has to be heartfelt and it has to be genuine. And if it's not, you may as well be, even the Bible's full of false gods and false prophets. I mean, you may as well just be pledging allegiance to one of those if it is not genuine. And so if it is genuine, why would you wait? That doesn't make any sense. But here's the rest of what he said. There's a lot of interesting stuff in here.
I still have time, but my understanding is you're never too late. And on top of that, any skepticism I have about reality.
Stop. I can't take it. All right, hold on. Okay, yes, that's true. It's never too late. But the problem is in your thinking, I'm going to live like a heathen up until the very last moment, until I'm about to die, and because I don't want to go to hell, then I'll convert. That's not how it works, my friends. I mean, this isn't, as my good friend Mark Jennings is fond of saying, this isn't fire insurance. It's not like you can you halfway buy into it and say, I'm going to live like a reprobate for most of my life, and then when it comes to time when it's decision day, whether I'm going to hell or not, then I'll convert. Because if that's your decision-making calculus, then it's not genuine. You don't genuinely believe, that you're not asking God into your life. Rather, you're saying, hey, I've been kind of a turd for my entire life. Please don't send me to hell. I mean, that's what it is. Now, in a minute, he's going to, he's right. It's never too late. But here's the difference. If you have been a complete living like a jerk for your entire life, and if at the end you have an epiphany, by the way, it is the day of Epiphany today. But if you're living like a complete jerk for most of your life, and at the end of it, you finally get it, and it's like, holy crap, I have screwed up my entire life, and then you ask God, yes, absolutely. Jesus will come into whatever, is left of your life, but it has to be genuine. But if you're making a bargain, that is, well, it's never too late, so I don't see why I shouldn't, behave like a complete idiot for the most of my life. And then when it's decision day, then I'll make the choice just so I don't go to hell. That's not how it works, my friends. But he's about to say something even more interesting that we should talk about, because I think there's a lot of people that would probably agree with him on face, but after we talk about it, you probably won't. But let's go ahead and listen to the rest of it.
Certainly be instantly answered if I wake up in heaven. I do believe that the dominant Christian theory is that I would wake up in heaven if I have a good life. Yeah, I don't necessarily have to, state something in advance. And so, to my Christian friends, yes, it's coming. So you don't need to talk me into it. I am now convinced that the risk reward is completely smart. If it turns out that there's nothing there, I've lost nothing. But I've respected your wishes, and I like doing that. If it turns out there is something there, and the Christian model is the closest to it, I win. So with your permission, I promise you that I will convert.
Okay, so there is so much in there. The argument that he's making when he says, all right, if I believe and there's nothing there, right? If I ask, God into my life and it turns out after I die that God didn't exist, well, then I've lost nothing. Nothing there. I mean, there's no hell, there's no heaven, so I'm good to go. But in the end, that if he does and he goes to heaven, then he wins. So he can't lose. That's what's called Plato's bargain. I'm almost sure that it's called Plato's bargain. But that's not accepting Christ. Now, here's the other part that I think that a lot of people would probably sympathize with it, and that's the idea that, well, if I'm generally a good person, if I'm nice to people and I don't steal and I don't lie and I'm just a generally good guy, then I'm going to go to heaven. That's not true. Jesus said, "I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes before the Father except through me." That's it. I mean, that's the whole sum total of it right there. There isn't some, I'm a good guy clause. Yeah, you should probably be a good guy. But think about this. Saul of Tarsus. Saul was a very bad guy, and he killed lots and lots and lots of Christians. And then God spoke to him and said, "Hey, dude, you're screwing up. You're going to do things my way." And then he became Paul, and he completely changed his life around. That's very different than saying, well, if I'm just all I got to do is be a good person. I don't really have to believe in God. I don't really have to do all that stuff. That's hogwash. Jesus said he's the way, the truth, and the life. Period. End of sentence. You can't get through just by doing good works. And that's a longer discussion. We should probably have Mark Jennings on the program, or Ken. We could probably have the conversation with Ken too. Ken's a minister, but it's worth having because that's a commonly held belief of a lot of people, and it's not true. It is not true at all. And I do not want any of you, to end your life and then find out that, well, no, there's no good guy clause on there. So anyway, my friends, I thought it was worth talking about it because, this is a commonly held belief. When we go to the break, I'm going to look up and make sure that's Plato's bargain. I'm almost positive that's what that's called. But anyway, it's interesting. And if you are thinking that, that you believe in the whole good guy clause, as we're calling it, that doesn't exist. It's like the good and plenty clause in the Constitution. Please don't let another day go by before you talk to somebody. Call one of your friends that's a Christian, call a minister, call a preacher, call somebody, call me, send me an email. I'll be glad to talk to you. But don't let another day go by believing that nonsense because, my friends, it's not fire insurance, nor was it intended to be. All right, from the never-ending broadcast of Communism Network, Growing Iran protests rattle leaders as Trump threatens to intervene. Now, in the last couple of weeks, I've been telling you that this is a big deal, that this is a really big deal, not because that there's a giant protest in Iran. That happens often, and the regime in Iran always cracks down on protesters. Now, so that's important, too, that there's protests going on. But what is also important is the why. Often, the why is the most important part of any question that you're going to ask. So the reason that these protests sparked is that their currency collapsed. Now, all right, so it's half a world away, and what does it matter to you if Iran's currency collapses? It matters for you for two reasons. One, that the world is ever increasingly interconnected economically. Say that one about 10 times fast. And so what happens in other places does affect you. The oil market is affected the world over. Now, Iran has had sanctions on it for a really, really long time, and so they don't produce a lot of oil. But they could. Okay, so you get rid of the mullahs and change the government around, it could drastically increase or decrease the price of oil. But the other reason why you should pay attention to it is you hear this phrase all the time. Well, this is America. That can't happen here. No, it's Wyoming. That sort of stuff doesn't happen here. Really? Every time a currency collapses, it follows that the government collapses as well. And the Roman Empire, the Weimar Republic, Zimbabwe in 2008, on and on and on. Every time a currency collapses, the government, it's chaos, and the government collapses with it. And so in this case, it may, this has been coming for a really long time, but this is something worth paying attention to. And a lot of us, we have a twofold attention barrier, I guess. A lot of people, most people, don't pay attention to what's happening in their community or in their state. And they're entirely focused on national politics because, that's what the 24/7 news cycle focuses on. So it's in your face all the time. Why wouldn't you focus on it? It kind of makes sense, right? But we're even less engaged when it comes to international affairs. Because again, not only is it, it's not just a capital that's a country away. It's another country that's half a world away. So why would you pay any attention to that? Doesn't really make a lot of sense, except that it does. You see, you have to pay attention to these things because our world is ever increasingly interconnected, and that what happens over in Europe does have an effect here. So let me just read you a little bit of this, and then we'll move on. I don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time on it because coming up, we're going to talk about a little Zoran Mamdani, actually a lot of him. And I quote, "Widespread protests have rocked Iran for more than a week and led to increasing violent clashes with security forces, prompting President Donald Trump to threaten intervention if a crackdown continues. The protests, which started with economic grievances by shopkeepers in Tehran, so it's all economic. Well, the protests were sparked by economics. There's a lot of bad stuff happening in Tehran. And quickly spread to remote cities like provinces like Fars and Loristan, where protesters chanted slogans against the ruling clerics, have raised pointed questions for the country's leaders about how much support they really enjoy. Ali Larijani, who serves as secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, alleged Friday, without providing evidence, that Israel and the U.S. were stoking escalating demonstrations. Of course, that's their response. That none of this is our fault. We didn't screw up the currency. This is all the fault of the little and the great Satan. It's the common refrain for the for the Iranian mullahs. Iranian officials attempted to project a united front with ordinary citizens in June when the Israeli military battered the country in the 12-day war. It's all Israel's fault. Last week, after a meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Trump issued a fresh threat to, quote, knock the hell out of Iran if the Islamic Republic attempts to rebuild its nuclear program. Now, he also issued a threat that if they start attacking protesters, the United States might intervene. So, this is yet another one of those situations where, our neighbors, our military members, could possibly be sent over there. And this is going to affect your pocketbook, so you should pay attention to it. Well, like I said, we're going to have kind of a short program today, so let's go ahead and take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to do a little Zoran Mamdani. Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Hunting season. Right about now, you're off with all of your pals, stalking the big gigantic elk or buck mule deer that you've been thinking about all summer long. And your lovely wife is at home, probably enjoying her time without you. But soon, my friend, all of that is going to come to a screeching halt. And I want you to think about just one little thing. She's able to park her car inside the garage because all of your hunting crap is with you right now. Now, if you'd like the marital bliss to continue, I suggest you make a call to Marcos and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. They can build you a garage or a barn or any other type of metal structure for you to store all of your toys in so that your wife can continue parking inside the garage. And you can avoid sleeping on the couch for the next month or two. Call Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Get them to build you a metal building before it's too late. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do, my friends, with talent given to me by God himself. Welcome back to the programs. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for watching the show. Thank you for listening. And, you know, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that we started the Open Range Record last Friday, and it's got it's had amazing success. If you haven't checked out the website, go look at it. It's openrangerecord.com. Give us a look and tell us what you think. It's a full-blown media site. And actually, right now, this program is being broadcast on one of the media pages. So there's a lot there. You can get my podcast there. Go check it out, openrangerecord.com. Well, I was way off, my friends. I thought it was Plato's bargain. Really, that's called Pascal's wager. Okay, and let me just give it to you again. So if you live, if you believe in God and you die and it turns out that God exists, well, then you win. Now, if you believe in God and you live your entire life in a good way and you die and God doesn't exist, well, then you've lost nothing. But if you live your life like a complete and total jerk and you don't believe in God, and when you die, it turns out that God does exist, well, then you've lost everything. Okay. Now, he's right. I mean, that's a fair assessment of things, but that's the wrong way to look. It's the wrong motivation to believe. I mean, if you're saying, well, I'm going to go with God because, the alternative's pretty bad, that I don't want to go to hell. Well, that means you're not really being genuine. What you just need to do Just accept Jesus. That's it. Talk to somebody who's a Christian. Go talk to a minister. Like I say, send me an email. I'll be glad to talk to you. All right. So we have a guy in New York, which, by the way, I'm actually kind of looking forward to our trip that's coming at the end of the week. Oh, I haven't told you about that. So at the end of the week, the lovely Christine and I are taking a trip to the Big Apple. She has a Redken training to go to, so we're going to go do that. She's going to go do her training. I'm going to go wander around New York, and I am going to take a microphone with me, and I'm going to try to do some man on the street type things. I think that'll be a lot of fun. Hey, can I ask you some questions? I'm from Wyoming. I don't know much about New York. Talk to me. So I think it's going to be a good time. But the mayor of New York, fortunately, we're not visiting it for like a year from now, because I think the poop is really going to hit the fan before too long with all of Mom Donnie's crazy stuff he's going to do. But the mayor, it's very clear that he's a communist. I mean, you can't say stuff like, let's see here. Oh, here's one of his most recent #1 hot hits. Listen to this. I'm going to get it to play. Oh, there it goes.
We will draw this city closer together. We will replace the frigidity of rugged individualism with the warmth of collectivism. If our campaign demonstrated that the people of New York yearn for solidarity, then let this government foster it.
Oh, we have to abandon the frigidity of rugged individualism. This whole thing that our country was built on, and engage the warmth of collectivism. Now, the funny part about that last phrase is it turns out that collectivism, in the end, it's not really warm. In fact, you're going to be really, really cold because there's not going to be enough money for you to make and for you to buy heat. Or, he has said other stuff, and I've played this one for you too. Listen to this. It's something to look forward to.
This new age will be defined by a competence and a compassion that have too long been placed at odds with one another.
Yes.
We will prove that there is no problem too large for government to solve and no concern too small for it to care about.
Wow! There's no problem too small for government to care about. Holy crap. The era of big government is back, my friends. But there's more. Let me tell you about, now, is one of the main things, let's see if I've got this one. Yeah. Okay, so before we go to the next part, I want to play you, this one's called Mom Donnie's Plans, or is what I've titled it. But just listen to him. One of them is going to be, he's going to freeze the rents, okay? So rent controls, those always turn out great, as you know. But here are Mom Donnie's plans. Listen.
May our only regret be that this day took so long to come.
Finally, it's here.
This new age will be one of relentless improvement.
Yes.
We will hire thousands more teachers.
Thousands.
We will cut waste from a bloated bureaucracy.
Oh, yes. Cut waste
we
from
will work
bloated...
tirelessly to make lights shine again in the hallways of NYCHA developments where they have long flickered. Safety and justice
I love this
will
part.
go hand in hand as we work with police officers to reduce crime and create a department of community safety that tackles the mental health crisis and homelessness crises head on. Excellence will become the expectation across government, not the exception.
Oh, yeah, excellence, right? So he's going to reduce the bloated bureaucracy. But remember, he just said there's no problem too small for government to care about. So I don't know how those two work together. But one of them, he said, we're going to freeze the rents, right? We're going to have rent controls, and it's going to be great. You're going to be able to afford a place to live, and your landlord can't jack up the rates, which also means that your landlord can't repair the building that you live in, which also means that your landlord can't make any money on it because the government is controlling it. But he has a gal that is in charge of his, she's called the tenant advisor. Now, just watch what she has to say. Now, this should scare the living crap out of you. Just watch.
I think the reality is that for centuries we've really treated property as an individualized good and not a collective good, and we are going to transitioning to treating it as a collective good and towards a model of shared equity will require that we think about it differently, and it will mean that families, especially white families, but some POC families who are homeowners as well, are going to have a different relationship to property than the one that we currently have.
A different relationship to property than the one we currently have. It kind of sounds to me like they're going to be seizing property. This is a full-blown communist regime. Now here's the thing, though. I mean, if you live in New York and you're listening to this program, and by the way, there are a couple of Cowboy State Politics listeners, at least a couple, that do live in New York, kind of take heart, because a lot of the stuff that Mamdani is saying he's going to do has to get through the city council, or it has to go through Albany. It has to go through the state legislature, and then it has to go to the governor. Now, the governor wants to get reelected, or, just wants to have a future in politics, so there's no reason to assume she's going to go along with all of this crazy stuff. But what he is going to do is he'll find out that some of these proposals he can't do on his own. He's the mayor of New York. He just needs to stay in his lane. He is not a president or a governor or anything like that. And so what he's going to find out is some of these things he can't do. And so that will cause him to use whatever powers that he does have in his office, and he'll push them into overdrive. Because he's a communist, and they all think the same way, that we have to push our plan as far as we possibly can. And he's already said that that's what he's going to do. Let's see if I've got it here. These groups tax a few. All right, so listen to this one, right? So this one, he's saying we have to be unapologetic about our socialism, which means that, and just think about the left. Okay, so the left never backtracks, right? When they get defeated, they don't look at it and say, "Oh man, we took a pretty bad defeat there. Like, maybe that's not a good idea." They don't work that way. What they do is they take a step back, and then they step around and they try it another way. It always happens. Liberals, redcoats, communists, they all act the same on this one. They never retreat. They're always moving forward. And I mean, think about, here's an easy example. So K.O. Case, Nancy Case, he has tried Medicaid expansion, by my count, 17 times. Several of those were bills that he sponsored, and they just died. But then he realized that nobody was going to vote for that. And so he tried different procedural moves, and then he tried different amendments. So in other words, well, the bill didn't work, so let's try an amendment. Amendment didn't work, so let's try a procedural move. So you're constantly trying other things to get it to work. And in the end, you find out that it doesn't work. But here's what Mamdani says. We have to be unapologetic about our socialism. This was during the campaign.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they're given. We have to continue to elect more socialists, and we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
Unapologetic about our socialism. We have to ensure that. And I mean, so one good thing for me is there's going to be no shortage of communist quotations coming forward. And I've got going forward, I've got a piece in here that, let me just look through. Oh yeah, I wanted to talk about this. It's a huge article. And then there was another one. Here we go. Yeah. Check this out. So from the Constantly Broadcasting Socialism channel, Mamdani says he opposed Nicolas Maduro's capture on a call with Trump after the Venezuela briefing. So he's the mayor of New York, and admittedly, that's America's largest city, so okay, he's a little bit different than other mayors. But how often have you heard that the mayor, any mayor, calls the president of the United States to say, "I don't like what you're doing here"? Not very often, man. Stay in your lane. But here's what CBS News says. Mamdani said he spoke with Mr. Trump on the phone Saturday after being briefed on Maduro's capture and arrival in New York to be prosecuted on narco-terrorism charges. Quote, I called the president and spoke with him directly to register my opposition to this act and to make clear that it was an opposition based on being opposed to a pursuit of regime change, to the violation of federal international law. There is no federal international law, by the way, and a desire to see that be consistent each and every day. The mayor, on just his third day in office, was asked about the U.S. military strike in Venezuela during an unrelated news conference in Brooklyn. He did not mention what the president's response was. I registered my opposition, I made it clear, and we left it at that. Okay, stay in your lane, Jack. You're not the president of the United States, and you're a mayor. Get it through your head. You're just, in many ways, you're no different than Mayor Pete. Except, of course, that if left to Mamdani, he'd probably throw Mayor Pete off a building. So, there is that difference. From Fox News, how a socialist cell in the U.S. mobilized pro-Maduro foot soldiers within 12 hours. Now, the truth is, to organize a protest, generally it takes a little bit longer, right? And you got to have flyers printed out. You've got to put all this into practice, and it takes a while. Not evidently if you're a socialist. From Fox News, quote, as the U.S. military carried out a daring operation to capture Maduro, a second front opened up within minutes in the United States, an information warfare, psychological, and propaganda operation run by a hardened cell of self-described Marxist, socialist, and communist leaders. For years, this cell has fomented anti-American hate in the U.S. under the cover of, quote, anti-war protests, rallying activists after 9/11 to condemn the U.S. response, appropriating anti-racism protests after the 2020 killing of George Floyd, marching with Antifa, agitators organizing anti-Semitic campus encampments in October of 2023, and by trying to activate working-class Americans to support Maduro and his regime in a war against U.S. imperialism. So, these are classic communists. We're not talking about, just some Antifa thug. No, these are the real deal. A Fox News digital analysis of their minute-by-minute moves overnight reveals how this network activated a coordinated ideological and information warfare campaign, moving through digital social media channels with quickly produced posters to mobilize foot soldiers on the streets for, quote, an emergency day of action in New York City, Washington, D.C., and an estimated 100 other cities. Over 12 hours, a network of self-described socialist, communist, and Marxist organizations used social media. Okay, so that was a tweet. And so let me just give you the opening blows here. This is a really long article, but it's really detailed. And you can find it, I think I got it on the front page of Fox News. But at 1:35 a.m., as U.S. Special Forces teams just landed in Venezuela, Breakthrough News, a socialist propaganda arm of the network, published some of the first video from the U.S. military strikes, blasting the Trump administration for waging, quote, what they called an illegal bombing campaign of Caracas, the capital of Venezuela. It was a talking point that was going to stick. 10 minutes later, at 1:45, one of the key leaders of this network, Manolo de los Santos, executive director at the People's Forum, a proudly socialist 501c3 nonprofit based in New York. Can you believe that? We're giving tax breaks to communist organizations. Our country is in deep, deep trouble. Less than an hour later, at 2:29, the Answer Coalition, a nonprofit co-founded by proud Marxist Brian Becker, published what they called a red siren alert on the social media platform X with a slick new poster calling supporters to the streets in Times Square for a protest Saturday to support Maduro. Now, if you're thinking that, again, this is one of those things that's a world away that you don't even have to pay any attention to, think again. The Wyoming Democrat Party was forwarding these posts on their own social media, trying to see if they too could organize a protest. You see, all of these left-wing groups, they don't act individually. In one way or another, they're all connected, and a lot of them are connected through Act Blue, and most of them are funded by. And when you track it down, most of them are funded by some of the same leftist organizations, which, interestingly enough, almost all of them either lead to the Democracy Alliance, whom I have talked about numerous times on the podcast, or to the Tides Foundation. The Tides Foundation is the Soros fund. I mean, that's the direct distribution from Soros's money. It almost always goes through the Tides Foundation. And interestingly enough, there's quite a bit of Tides Foundation money in Wyoming in a lot of different groups. You know, if you hear how do I want to call it? If you hear a flowery sounding name of a group that just sounds too good to be true. So, for example, there might be Friends of Environmental Coal, Friends of Clean Coal, and they always pick something that's pretty deceiving. And you look them up. There's this great website called Influence Watch. It'll tell you all of the connections between a lot of these groups, and there are a couple of them in Wyoming that are on there. The Equality State Policy Center is on there. Wyoming Equality. There's several of them on there. The Equality State Policy Center, they're one of the ones that has ties to Soros-funded labor unions. So, I mean, this whole world of leftist propaganda, it's all really, really small. There's not that much daylight between all of them. And if you think about it, so these protests erupt in New York. There's communist and Marxist organizations that put together the social media campaign that happened just hours after the operation was unfolding in Venezuela. Now, think about how fast that happens. I mean, information travels at light speed. And I mean, it literally does. It's through electrons. But it happens so fast now that you could have somebody in New York setting up protests, and 5 minutes later, the Democrat Party in Wyoming is forwarding those same messages. And so anytime you see, and it's almost always the Democrat Party, but sometimes, it's other groups. But usually when you see a slick flyer that the Democrat Party has put out, look for it in other places. And the sound money is, the smart money is on that it came from somewhere else, that there is another group that is associated with the Democrats and the National Democrat Party and the State Democrat Party. And, if you look hard enough, you're going to find those connections. And the reason why they get away with this a lot of the time is most people don't pay any attention to it, right? They just take it at face value and you don't look into it. But when you do investigate it, what you find is that, weird, they're all connected. Who would have thought that? Now, I am not, as I said at the top of the broadcast, I am not, you know what, let's go here. Yeah, let's go here first. Sorry, you hear a lot of paper move on my desk. I'm just getting a little, trying to figure out where to go next. So I mentioned at the top of the broadcast that I don't have a problem with arresting Maduro. I don't have a problem with indicting him. I don't have a problem with him being tried in New York. At least we didn't kill him like Obama did all the time. And Trump too. Soleimani and al-Baghdadi took those guys out. They absolutely deserved it. And so I'm okay with all this. What I'm not okay, what I don't know yet, what I have questions about is how far is this going to go? And what exactly does it mean when you say, I'm going to run the country? Well, there's a piece out from Jonathan Turley, who, I mean, he is not a conservative, but I do like his thinking. He's a lawyer. He's on Fox News a lot. He's got a piece out on his own site, and it's entitled, "The United States Captures Nicolas Maduro and His Wife." And let me just read you the opening paragraphs, and then we'll talk about it. Quote, "In an extraordinary military operation, the U.S. launched a large-scale military operation in Caracas with special forces seizing President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. The operation comes not long after the 37th anniversary of the capture of Manuel Noriega. In fact, on January 3rd, they brought him, which is the same date, by the way, they brought Noriega to the U.S. and put him in prison. He was indicted in a 4-count superseding indictment with Diosdado Cabello Rodon, head of the Venezuela's national constituent, and several of his other underlings. This operation will be justified as executing the criminal warrant and responding to an international drug cartel, a very similar legal framework to the one used against Noriega. There is precedent supporting that early operation, which will now be used to defend the actions in Venezuela. Here's the part of the earlier description from the Justice Department of the indicted conduct. Quote, Maduro helped manage and ultimately led the Cartel of the Suns, a Venezuelan drug trafficking organization comprised of high-ranking Venezuelan officials. As he gained power in Venezuela, Maduro participated in a corrupt and violent narco-terrorism conspiracy with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC. The longtime foreign policy wonks will recognize that name, the FARC, FARC. As designated foreign terrorist organizations. Maduro negotiated multi-ton shipments of FARC-produced cocaine, directed the Cartel of the Suns to provide military-grade weapons, coordinated with narcotics traffickers in Honduras and other countries to facilitate large-scale drug trafficking. So a lot of this is narcotics-based. All right, so that being said, Democrats pounced pretty quickly. Jim McGovern from Massachusetts said, quote, without authorization from Congress and with the vast majority of Americans opposed to military action, Trump just launched an unjustified illegal strike on Venezuela. He says we don't have enough money for health care, but somehow we have unlimited funds for war. Okay, so it's not illegal. The War Powers Act gives the president power to act, and he has to inform Congress within 48 hours. The reason why presidents don't go talk to Congress ahead of time is people like Jim McGovern would leak it, and they would ruin the operation. Hey, guys, they're coming for you. Get the heck out of the country. It's exactly what would happen. So, no, Congress does not need to be consulted ahead of time, nor should they be, because you got too many. That thing leaks like a sieve. And secondly, the War Powers Act says they don't have to. And third, if you want to add on top of it, the authorization for the use of military force, it should be rescinded, by the way, is still in effect. So Trump is very much in the clear on this one. Let's see here. Ordinarily, Turley says, the Vienna Convention of Consular Relations and other international agreements required the United States to notify the embassy of a foreign national arrested and held in the United States. Notice seems a tad superfluous in this case because it's been all over the news. In his appeal, Noriega argued that his arrest violated international law under the head of state immunity doctrine. The district court rejected Noriega's head of state immunity claim because the U.S. government never recognized Noriega as Panama's legitimate ruler, an argument that will be made in the Maduro case. Because, of course, I told you, maybe it was on the podcast on Wednesday, but I told you that an election was held in Venezuela. Everybody there says that the opposition leader won. Maduro says he won by 51%, but he wouldn't release the results. He wouldn't show anybody what the results of the election was, leading you to believe that he didn't win that election. And the United States never recognized him as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. So got that on our side. The United States 11th Circuit also rejected the immunity claim. Noriega also argued that his capture violated the treaty providing for the extradition of criminals, May of 1904. The Supreme Court decision, United States versus Alvarez Machain in 1992, however, was found to bar this argument. The issue was whether he was abducted to the United States with a superseding extradition treaty, the 11th Circuit held. Let's see here. What else? The Noriega case offers ample support for the Trump administration, and this is Turley writing now, which has had an outstanding arrest warrant for over 5 years. He is not viewed as the duly elected leader of Venezuela and has been tied to a criminal drug cartel. And as you know, terrorist narcotics organizations have been classified by the Biden administration and the Trump administration as terrorist organizations, more so in the Trump administration. Turley ends it with, this action will also have a major impact on foreign policy. The Monroe Doctrine just became the Trump Doctrine. So what the Monroe Doctrine is the U.S. will handle stuff in our hemisphere. Europe can handle stuff in Europe's hemisphere. And in other words, stay the heck out of our side of the globe. We got this. That's the Monroe Doctrine. This action not only confronted Venezuela, but also Cuba, which was supplying the security around Maduro. Presumably, Cuban security may have been involved in the firefight. While cutting off vital oil to Cuba, the Trump administration just delivered a blow against the Cuban regime, such that it is. Arguably, one of the most stinging defeats since crushing the Cuban forces in Grenada in 1983. Legally, Trump has the upper hand in the case. Maduro will replay the arguments from Noriega's case. However, he presents an even weaker case on the merits under the controlling precedent than did Noriega. So now you have even a lawyer on the left saying that Trump is pretty well in the clear on this one. All right, my friends, we're pretty close to the bottom of the hour. And like I said, I've got a funeral I have to go to. One of our family friends passed away from cancer, so I've got to go to Buffalo and go to his funeral. So thank you for watching the program today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for everything that you do for this program. And if you missed the newsletter, by the way, why are you missing it? You should sign up for it. Go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, and you'll see the pop-up. And just put your email address in there, hit submit, and I will send you a copy of the newsletter. But in the last newsletter, I included a screenshot of the analytics for this program. And just last year, January 1st to December 31st, this program has been viewed over 707,000 times. Over 700,000 times. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you tomorrow. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.